What was a house rule you had as a kid that you thought was completely normal until you grew up and realized not all households followed? My door could only be closed if I was changing clothes. If my parents suspected that I was hiding anything, they could, and did, go through anything to make sure. Dresser and desk drawers, bags, closet, car, whatever they felt was necessary. Even my mail was fair game. As a result, I got really good at hiding things. Strict parent raised good liars. We had family council every Sunday night after dinner. We would sit and say good things that happened that week, share our grievances if we had any, we always did, make a dinner menu, and assign chores. Frankly, it was stellar parenting. Though, if I mention it to my mother now, she will brag about it for a solid 20 minutes before we can move on. She will brag about it for a solid 20 minutes before we can move on. You should bring that up in your next grievances report. Haiku night dinners. Some nights we spoke in haiku, and only haiku. I had super laid back parents, but there were a few certain things that they were randomly crazy strict about. No gum, no Play-Doh, no cereal with sugar as one of the top 3 ingredients, no Simpsons. I had basically no rules growing up, but those 4 things would make them lose their goddamn minds. I still get anxious when I'm chewing gum and I'm 35. I come from a large family. Anytime we'd order pizza, we ordered a few different kinds because, obviously, there were different preferences. Any leftovers were left in their respective boxes and placed in the oven. I did that when I lived with a couple of roommates, and of course their reaction was, "I just burned this box. Why was it in the freaking oven?" My husband's mother does this. I can't tell you how many times I've nearly caught her oven on fire because she had a pizza box in there and I didn't know about it. I don't understand. Cheese needs to be refrigerated. We live in the south. It's hot and humid and mold grows everywhere. IDK how she hasn't gotten food poisoning. I had to answer the phone. Hello, this is first name last name speaking. Whenever I answered the phone, this is OBV in the 80s before caller ID on landlines. My mom tried to make my childhood friends do it too when they called me to play. As in, "Hi, can I talk to Jill Chulpan? Who is this?" "It's friend." Well, friend, when you call this house and I answer the phone, you should say hello to me and then tell me that it's you, your first name and last name, before you ask to talk to Jill Chulpan. Boy, was I popular. If I got hurt doing a certain activity, I wasn't allowed to do that activity again. My mother ended that rule though when I broke my wrist snowboarding when I was 16 and didn't tell her until a month later when I couldn't move my wrist at all and it required surgery with a bone graft to repair. I had that rule, too. My mom bought me a skateboard. I immediately ate crap on it, as I imagine just about everyone does their first time, and then she took it right back to the store. If you ever ran out of toilet paper whilst on the toilet, you had to sing the Stranded song or else no one else in the house would bring you a roll. I'm surprised I haven't seen anything about toilet paper, but my family kept toilet paper in the bathroom. It never made sense to me that people kept spare rolls outside and still doesn't make sense. Not mine, but my mother-in-law and her sister will fuss at you if you wash your hands in the kitchen sink. I think that's weird. If there's a sink and some hand soap, I say wash away. My wife isn't like that. This cracks me up. I had no idea that anyone else would do this. I wash my hands wherever, but my sister has been like that since we were kids. She would have to do the dishes and then she would run to wash her hands in the bathroom because somehow the bathroom water was different than the kitchen water. We are 40 and she still does this and I still laugh at her for it. We weren't allowed to eat anything without first asking. Even a glass of water, we were required to ask first. When my boyfriend and I started dating, I would ask his parents if I could eat or drink something if I was hungry or thirsty, and it was a hard habit to break when his mom told me I could literally eat or drink anything other than the alcohol. It was so weird to just go into the fridge or pantry without permission. I sometimes have to fight the urge to ask my BF if I can eat our food in our apartment. When I went to my parents' house over Christmas, I was reprimanded for getting an apple without asking first. It's just all so weird, but it used to be so normal. Whenever I enter my childhood home, I instinctively open the fridge even if I don't want anything. I also tend to eat any fruit that is in the bowl and I have no idea why. My dad used to set up mine and my sister's Easter egg hunts in such a way we followed written clues from place to place as way to help us learn to read. Until I was a young adult, I assumed that was how all kids did Easter egg hunts. When I was young, my mom was big on setting up treasure hunts like this for birthdays. I'd have to follow the clues to find my presents. I adored it. Wakey time. No noise annoying mum and dad until 7 AM. This was a really necessary one. BC I was a very early riser as a kid and I loved to talk to my parents. The rule was that I could come to their bed and curl up next to them, but I couldn't talk until 7. It was actually really nice and made sure I got enough rest myself. Tragically, once I started rowing like 7 years later, mum and dad had to get up at 4 anyway to get me to the sheds. Sorry guys. Any of the kids, 7 of us, can play with any toy that is left out. The owner of the toy can't take it back until whoever's playing with it is done. If the toy is put away in the owner's room, permission must be asked. That's a good rule. I wasn't allowed to take a shower if I was home alone. I also learned at age 7 that other households closed the bathroom door when using the toilet and keeping it open was weird. I learned that by keeping the door open at a friend's house. A friend walked by the bathroom, saw me, told their mom called my mom, and all of a sudden the new house rule was we close the bathroom door when using the toilet. I can't take a shower if I'm home alone either. My dad apparently busted his head open slipping in the shower when he was living alone in college. He had to get up and drive himself to the emergency room. Now he won't let us shower if we're alone, because he is paranoid the same will happen to us. My parents would check my and my brother's teeth for sugar bugs every night after we brushed our teeth, before we got in bed. If they thought we were trying to skip brushing our teeth, they would tell us they could see the sugar bugs in our teeth and would make us go brush again. My brother and I were so convinced these sugar bugs were real we would constantly ask when we'd be able to see them. My parents always told us only people 13 and older could see them. But by the time we got to be 13 we had completely forgotten about the sugar bugs in our teeth. I love thinking about creative parenting tactics like this. I've even used that one while babysitting a fussy kid who doesn't want to brush their teeth get ready for bed and it helps a lot. I'm 33 and I still watch out for sugar bugs. My mum used to pay me to be my own babysitter between the ages of 10-14 or so. The rule was that as long as I didn't make a mess and I'd put myself to bed by the time she got home, then I got $10 in the morning. My parents did this. Only I have 2 younger brothers, and the rule was that we would all get paid, but only if we got along and didn't burn the place down. It was very effective. Even if we fought while they were away, we'd all be on our best behavior by the time they got back. I didn't want to miss out on that payday. If you couldn't find something, and you asked someone for help, sibling or parent, and they found it for you, they got to punch you in the arm. My mom freaks out about hearing commercials on TV. The second it goes to commercial break it has to be muted. She also mutes it if she thinks it's about to go to commercial, even though sometimes she's wrong. And she doesn't really pay attention, so she doesn't notice a lot of the time when the commercials are over, so she leaves it on mute when the show is back on. It's very difficult to watch TV with her. That's interesting. My in-laws prefer to have the commercials on. They seriously say that we owe it to the advertisers. The mute button is there for a reason. I had to wash the dishes every night, even if I wasn't home for the meal. There were times I'd get home from an away basketball game. I was in the team after 10 PM and the dishes had sat since they finished reading around 6:30 PM. My older brother's nightly chore, take out the garbage. He'd be done in 2 minutes. I'd have 30+ minutes of washing, drying, putting away, and cleaning up the kitchen. Same mug. My parents' explanation for why it had to be me was that my brother didn't do it properly. Same with vacuuming. Maybe it's not a house rule, but when I was 6 my mom told me that if I behaved she would let me skip school on Saturdays and Sundays. One day my teacher said see ya Monday and I knew. My boss makes this joke every Friday. You all worked so hard, you can take the next 2 days off. We weren't allowed to get into the fridge or the cabinets without asking permission. My family was very poor and we had a limited food budget, so eating something without permission very possibly meant eating one ingredient of a meal my stepmother was planning on cooking within the next few days. I went to friends' houses and they just ate whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. Hey, at least one that isn't crazy and actually makes sense. Not a rule, but still to this day I am befuddled at my mother's reasoning. When I was a boy we lived in a pretty rural part of Mexico. Horrible infrastructure. Power would often go out in the middle of the night. She would proceed to wake my brother and I up, simply to wait until the power came back on. For the life of me I cannot figure that out. She wasn't afraid of the dark. She just wanted to make sure we saw the power return. If I told my parents I was leaving at a certain time, I had to leave at that time. Let's say I told my parents I would leave a party at 9. I couldn't leave at 8:50, or I'd get yelled grounded. I couldn't leave at 9:10, or I would get yelled grounded. Same thing went for when I was leaving my house to go somewhere. My dad made a rule that I had to kill 7 flies a day during my summer break. No whistling. We had this rule growing up, because my mom can't whistle and it pee her off that all of us can. Now that most of us are grown, we whistle whenever we want to. If she complains, the 5 of us whistling can drown her out. My family had a thing we called the food blanket. When we'd eat casual meals, we'd lay a blanket on the living room floor and eat on it, like a picnic. My parents didn't want to get any food on the carpet. Instead of set the table, my mom would say, "Go lay out the blanket." I remember being really confused when I learned every family didn't have a food blanket. So many comments here are stories of abuse, but this one is really cute. Edit. I'm aware that currently most of the top voted comments are not stories of abuse. At the time I made this comment, many of the top comments were unquestionably cases of abuse. The order of the comments has changed in the past several hours because people have upvoted the fun, funny, relatable ones. When I got in trouble I was put on reading restriction as a punishment. I loved to read as a kid, still do, so it was an effective punishment at the time. Same OMG, my parents would ground me from my DS that I loved, but it was actually just a trick so that when I was grounded it didn't really matter. Then they figured it out, and instead of grounding me from my DS, they grounded me from reading. And that was when I first started liking video games. It was funny because they never did both. My parents used a laissez-faire parenting style, no censorship whatsoever. I watched Rocky Horror Picture Show with my brother when I was 7. Pretty awkward when I brought the VHS with me to a sleepover at a friend's house. The parents were mortified. My parents were like this as well. I saw Airplane much younger than I should have. Their reasoning was that any inappropriate jokes would go over my head anyway. We weren't allowed to walk in our dining room unless we were using the room for a special occasion. The carpet always had that just vacuumed look, so it was a dead giveaway if anyone walked across it. I had to sleep in an unfinished, unheated basement, but my mom's living room was off limits. Tape half the house off in winter. Wasn't in my home, but my aunt and uncle never let us use the upstairs washroom when we were kids because they thought we'd touch the walls with our dirty hands, so they made us pee in a jar they kept under the kitchen sink and just poured it down the drain when we were done. Never thought it was strange until I brought it up to my cousin a few years ago. We laughed pretty hard about it. No curfew as long as I told my mom where I would be. I was always honest BCS. I loved being 16 with no curfew. If we ever snuck out of a friend's house we would literally phone home and say we are sneaking out to go to a concert. I couldn't add the jokes in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer song. My dad thought it was disrespectful. It's not really a house rule, it's just a really odd one. Also, when a parent says your name you have to reply coming not yet because they'll ignore it. My brother went through a phase where, in order to gain our mother's attention, would say yo. This bothered her tremendously. First thing upon coming in the house you have to change into clean pants and wash your hands. Guests were exempt from the pants rule but not hand washing. If you took your shoes off while you were out you had to change your socks as well. In Filipino culture, you change into your pambahay when you get home. Basically just more comfortable clothes, light shirts, shorts, etc. I thought people in TV didn't cause they didn't wanna deal with the wardrobe change. Anyway, personally I don't feel home yet until I'm all changed. Was literally told by my best friend's dad I was only allowed to eat popcorn one kernel at a time. Somebody probably choked once. Pretty easy to inhale a piece of popcorn, less likely if you're not eating as many at a time as fit in your mouth. When I was sick I couldn't be in my bed because it would make it dirty. My mom put a towel in a corner on the hardwood floor and I had to stay there until she dared me better enough to use my bed. WTF. My father never let us talk around the dinner table. Once when I was 15 I asked everyone around the table how they were doing and how their day was. My dad got up angrily after hurriedly finishing his meal and said, "I can't stand people talking around a meal. If I wanted to talk to you I would." We finished our meal in silence. Rude as frick to say to your child. My dad used to give me all the change in his pocket to leave him and my mom alone so they could shut their bedroom door and talk. It wasn't till many years later that I realized I was basically pimping out my mom. I wasn't allowed in my parents' room at all, not even to use their shower if the hall bath was occupied and we were going to be late. I had this rule after my mom got remarried. It was so weird and formal. I went from chatting with my mom while she was on the toilet in her room to not being allowed in her and my stepdad's bedroom ever. I wasn't a big fan of this rule. No swearing, which includes the obvious as well as stupid, idiot, shut up and fart. My grandmother thinks that fart is a dirty word. She prefers poopsie, which is, in my opinion, far dirtier. If you don't get A's you don't eat at the table. I legit thought this was normal until I had dinner at a friend's house and my friend brought home a devastating report card. His parents were so supportive and loving. Bare skin was not allowed to touch the leather sofa. No shorts, bare feet, tank tops, etc. Also we had to peel mushrooms. It took forever and was completely stupid. I did not even know mushroom peeling was a thing. Just watched a YouTube video to confirm. My mind is blown. We had to have milk after dinner, but before bed. Asked my mom when I was older what that was about and she realized we could have just had milk with dinner if we wanted, but she had been raised kosher so it wasn't something she thought about. I remember reading something like that last time. There was a thread like this. Person has dinner with their friend's family, and at friend's house they weren't allowed to have a drink with their dinner. They had to finish all their food before they were allowed to drink anything. When I was really young I had a night bell. It was this old clay bell that hung in the kitchen, and when I had to go to bed I got to ring the bell and everyone would come say goodnight and then I would go to bed. Not really a rule, but a weird little ritual in our house. That's actually really sweet. I want a night bell. No television before 5 or after 8, and dinner is at 6. The room in my house that was used for extra storage was always called the sewing room. I've never seen so much as a sewing machine in there. So much. Get out of here lol. You have been visited by the romantic doggo. Comment love is magic so you never fall in the friend zone. Like and subscribe you magnificent person.